welcome to Guidance Review. I'm David Pudwill, and today we're going to be talking about FDA's recent guidance document on the ASCA Pilot. That's the Accreditation Scheme for Conformity Assessment, which was recently published in September of 2020. There are a few key takeaways I'd like you to get out of today's video. The first is to understand the purpose and specific goals of the ASCA Pilot. The second is to understand the development of the ASCA Pilot. And finally, the roles and responsibilities for those involved. So with that, let's go ahead and get into today's guidance document. Here we have on FDA's website the current final guidance document. We see here we can download the final guidance, we can read the Federal Register notice, and we can head over to the docket here. And this particular guidance, as we can see here and elsewhere, is issued by the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, as well as the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. And there's some high-level detail here. And again, here's another link to where comments can be submitted. So if we jump in over to regulations.gov, we see here there are 65 comments received. There are a couple links here in terms of the primary documents, and here's the beginning of the comments. But if we click here to view all, we can pull up the full list of comments. And there are a number of comments from, as you can see, a number of different folks. Some, sort of specific comments about individual lines that should be changed, and then more substantial comments in terms of attached documents that people have provided. So it's a treasure trove of information that looks like FDA has been digging through over the course of the past number of months to get us to where we are today in terms of the current final guidance document. So if we go ahead and click the download final guidance document, which I've done, we can pull that up. And here is the current final guidance document. This was issued on September 25th, 2020, and the draft of the document was issued on September 23rd, 2019. And again, for questions, there are a couple email addresses provided here. And this is from, again, the Center for Devices and Radiological Health and the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. Here's some information on public comment. We've just been to that site. Comments may also be sent by mail, and additional copies can be requested from CDRH or from CBER. And here we get into the table of contents, and you will see this is a very large guidance document, and we are not going to be getting through all of it. We're going to get through the first about 15 or 16 pages, and if you want to, you can go through the remainder of the document on your own. But as you can see, it continues. It's 2 full pages, or I should say maybe just a page and a half of the table of contents alone here. So fairly extensive, and lots of good information here if you are getting involved in the accreditation scheme for conformity assessment. So here we have a high-level introduction, which states that the Pilot Accreditation Scheme for Conformity Assessment Program, hereafter referred to as the ASCA Pilot, is authorized under the relevant sections in accordance with amendments. FDA was directed to issue a guidance regarding the goals and implementation of the ASCA Pilot. The establishment of the goals, scope, procedures, and a suitable framework for the voluntary ASCA Pilot supports the agency's continued efforts to use its scientific resources effectively and efficiently to protect and promote public health. FDA believes the voluntary ASCA Pilot may further encourage international harmonization of medical device regulation because it incorporates elements, where appropriate, from a well-established set of international conformity assessment practices and standards, such as ISO IEC 17000 series. The voluntary ASCA Pilot does not supplant or alter any other existing statutory or regulatory requirements governing the decision-making process for pre-market submissions. And here, again, FDA calls out that this guidance refers to voluntary consensus standards, And for the current edition of FDA's recognized consensus standards referenced in this document, they give you a link to the FDA recognized consensus standards database. And there's some more information at a couple other links here that FDA gives you as well. And here's the high-level statement that FDA includes about the fact that this guidance does not establish legally enforceable responsibilities, and it should be viewed as recommendations unless specific regulatory or statutory requirements are cited. And then some more background. FDARA amended Section 514 and added a subsection titled Pilot Accreditation Scheme for Conformity Assessment that required FDA to establish a pilot program under which testing laboratories may be accredited by accreditation bodies meeting the criteria specified by FDA to assess the conformance of a device within certain FDA-recognized consensus standards. Determinations by accredited testing laboratories that a device conforms with an eligible standard included as part of the pilot program shall be accepted by FDA for the purposes of demonstrating such conformity unless FDA finds that a particular such determination shall not be so accepted. And the statute provides that FDA may review determinations by accredited testing laboratories, including by conducting periodic audits of such determinations or processes of accreditation bodies or testing laboratories. Following such a review, or if FDA becomes aware of information materially bearing on safety or effectiveness of a device tested by an accredited testing laboratory, FDA may take additional measures as determined appropriate, including suspension or withdrawal of accreditation of a testing laboratory or a request for additional information regarding a specific device. And then in terms of an overview here, under the ASCA Pilot's Conformity Assessment Scheme, ASCA recognized accreditation bodies accredit testing laboratories using ISO IEC 17025-2017 general requirements for the competence of testing and calibration laboratories and the ASCA program specifications associated with each FDA-recognized consensus standard and test method included in the ASCA Pilot. The FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion in the ASCA Pilot and the ASCA program specifications are provided in the relevant standard-specific ASCA Pilot guidance documents, which can be accessed from the ASCA website. And just to note here that FDA, as part of the release of this broad ASCA Pilot program guidance, also released guidances on basic safety and essential performance, standard-specific guidance for medical electrical equipment and laboratory medical equipment, and on biocompatibility testing of medical devices. So here, FDA continues that ASCA accredited testing laboratories may conduct testing to provide data used to determine conformance of a device with one or more of the FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion in the ASCA Pilot. When an ASCA accredited testing laboratory conducts testing under the ASCA Pilot, it should provide to the device manufacturer all information listed in the relevant ASCA program specifications, including an ASCA summary test report. Example ASCA summary test reports for the FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion in the ASCA Pilot are provided in the associated standard-specific ASCA Pilot guidance documents. Device manufacturers may choose to use an ASCA accredited testing laboratory to conduct testing for pre-market submissions to FDA. A device manufacturer that uses an ASCA accredited testing laboratory to perform testing in accordance with the provisions of the ASCA Pilot can then include a declaration of conformity, DOC, with any necessary supplemental documentation as part of a pre-market submission to FDA. Testing performed by an ASCA accredited testing laboratory can be used to support a pre-market submission for any device if the testing was conducted using an FDA-recognized consensus standard and test method eligible for inclusion in the ASCA Pilot and in accordance with the ASCA program specifications for that standard. During the ASCA Pilot, FDA generally will accept determinations from ASCA accredited testing laboratories when accompanied by a DOC and appropriate supplemental documentation, and when the standard and test method are within the testing laboratory's scope of ASCA accreditation at the time of testing. As part of the enactment of MDUFA 4, FDA committed to publish the following information on FDA's publicly accessible ASCA website: a list of ASCA-recognized accreditation bodies, and a list of ASCA-accredited testing laboratories. To further promote transparency, FDA intends to also identify an expiration date for each accreditation body's ASCA recognition. And here we can see the flow chart here that FDA has provided, where you start, you move forward, accreditation bodies apply to FDA for ASCA recognition, FDA grants ASCA recognition, testing laboratories receive accreditation, testing laboratories apply to FDA for ASCA accreditation, FDA grants ASCA accreditation to qualified testing laboratories, device manufacturers select ASCA accredited testing laboratories for device testing, and then ASCA accredited testing laboratory conducts device testing and provides information listed in relevant ASCA program specifications, and the device manufacturer includes the DOC with ASCA test summary report in the pre-market submission to FDA, and FDA applies pre-market review considerations per the ASCA pilot. So here's the process flow for this particular pilot program. In terms of scope, several complementary guidance documents are being used to implement the ASCA pilot. This guidance describes the goals and implementation of the ASCA pilot as required by Section 514, specifically the criteria specified by the Secretary around qualifications, processes, terms of participation, ASCA program specifications associated with each eligible FDA-recognized consensus standard, and this guidance document provides a description of how the ASCA program specifications were developed. The certain standards recognized under Section 514 eligible for inclusion in the ASCA pilot, and this guidance document provides a description of how these standards and methods were selected, and also the process by which device manufacturers may incorporate testing in a submission to FDA, and the policy regarding agency review of determinations by ASCA accredited testing laboratories. The processes and policies FDA intends to follow when conducting periodic audits of such determinations or processes of accredited bodies or testing laboratories, and the processes and policies FDA intends to follow regarding suspension or withdrawal of accreditation or requesting additional information. The FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion in the ASCA pilot are identified in the relevant standard-specific ASCA pilot guidance documents. These guidances were developed for the purpose of being able to implement the framework described in this guidance and provide more detailed information for the FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion. And each standard-specific ASCA pilot guidance document includes the following information: detailed list of FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion, ASCA program specifications, recommended pre-market submission contents specific to such standards and test methods, example ASCA summary test reports, and example DOC for the pilot. These ASCA pilot guidance documents do not address specific content for a particular pre-market submission. For more information about the use of standards, FDA gives you these links here. And this guidance document is not intended to be a complete resource for understanding conformity assessment. Key conformity assessment resources used to develop the ASCA pilot are described in Section 5 of this guidance. And here we get into terminology. I'm not going to go into this in detail. You can go ahead and read these definitions if you need, but we have a couple pages of definitions here that have been provided by FDA. And in terms of the purpose of the ASCA pilot, evidence of conformity to one or more FDA-recognized consensus standards is often a thorough and efficient way for a manufacturer to address certain questions of safety and/or effectiveness. For manufacturers and FDA to benefit from the efficiency, however, FDA must have confidence in the DOC. DOCs are discussed in Section 514. These resources indicate that a device manufacturer may provide a DOC, or Declaration of Conformity, to one or more FDA-recognized consensus standards in a pre-market submission to be reviewed by FDA. A device manufacturer may declare conformity to an FDA-recognized consensus standard based on test results. However, there may be variability in how this testing is conducted. Given this variability, and because medical devices are increasingly complex and can involve high risk to patients, DOCs are not always sufficient to fully address FDA's questions regarding safety and effectiveness for pre-market submissions. And FDA reviewers may need to request additional information. In some instances, a device manufacturer may decide to repeat or revise testing based on FDA input, and these interactions and requests for modifications in test methodology can result in delays and additional costs, but are needed to provide FDA with the necessary confidence in a DOC for its intended purpose. And here FDA highlights that it has sought stakeholder input. Specific goals of the ASCA pilot. The pilot is intended to support FDA's public health mission by providing increased confidence in testing results from an ASCA accredited testing laboratory, as well as potentially decreasing the burden of individual pre-market submissions when manufacturers rely on testing completed by ASCA accredited testing laboratories. The overarching goals of the pilot are intended to enhance confidence in medical device testing, promote consistency and predictability in the pre-market review process, encourage effective use of FDA resources, enhance regulatory efficiency, and support international harmonization. And then there's a little bit of detail here as well that FDA has provided on some of the history of development of the ASCA pilot. They go into details here about stakeholder input and engaging with NIST, and that FDA held a public workshop from May 22nd to 23rd, 2018. And here they provide a link to FDA's workshop and conference's website. Input from the resources that FDA has identified here in this discussion has been informative in the design of the Conformity Assessment Scheme and selection of the initial FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods eligible for inclusion in the ASCA pilot as discussed in this guidance, as well as the standard-specific ASCA pilot guidance documents. And here FDA then goes into conformity assessment resources. FDA sought to maximize the use of existing frameworks and arrangements in developing the conformity assessment scheme. And the conformity assessment scheme leverages the following well-established set of international conformity assessment standards and arrangements that are used worldwide by stakeholders, including accreditation bodies, testing laboratories, and device manufacturers. So this is ILAC, or the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation Mutual Recognition Agreement, ISO IEC 17011, ISO IEC 17025, 2017. And in addition to the above resources, FDA also leveraged the following NIST documents, which provide an overview of conformity assessment in the design, development, and implementation scheme of the ASCA pilot, and they provide several links here. In terms of selection of FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods, when deciding which FDA-recognized standards and test methods to include in the pilot, FDA sought to maximize the benefit to the public health by selecting FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods that manufacturers often rely upon to address significant issues of safety and/or effectiveness. FDA identified consensus standards and test methods as eligible for the ASCA pilot based on input from stakeholders at the public workshop and provided in response to the Federal Register notice. FDA regularly considers recognition of updated editions and standards. FDA is aware that depending on the nature of the changes to the new edition, revisions to the associated ASCA program specifications may be needed. And here FDA provides a link to the FDA-recognized consensus standards database yet again, and also another link to the appropriate use of voluntary consensus standards in pre-market submissions. In terms of specifications development, ISO IEC 17025 includes general requirements for the competence of testing and calibration laboratories. Sections of the standard discuss impartiality, confidentiality, organizational structure, resource processes, verification of methods, validation of methods, sampling, reporting of results, and management systems. The ASCA program specifications are used in addition to ISO IEC 17025 by ASCA recognized accreditation bodies for accreditation of testing laboratories for the ASCA pilot. In developing the ASCA program specifications for each set of FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods, FDA sought to ensure that the program specifications include only those aspects of testing laboratory competence that are necessary above and beyond those already provided in 17,025 in order to ensure confidence in device testing submitted to FDA. The ASCA program specifications are located in the standard-specific ASCA Pilot guidance documents. Then we get into roles and responsibilities, and FDA identifies some roles and responsibilities here for accreditation bodies, for testing laboratories, for device manufacturers, and for FDA staff. Under the ASCA Pilot, accreditation bodies accredit testing laboratories using the specifications of ISO IEC 17025 and the ASCA program specifications associated with each eligible FDA-recognized consensus standard and test method eligible for inclusion. Upon granting ASCA recognition, FDA intends to provide to the accreditation body a scope of ASCA recognition describing the extent to which the accreditation body has demonstrated competence in accreditation for purposes of the ASCA Pilot. The responsibilities of an accreditation body are identified in the signed agreement section of the accreditation body application. And they refer to Section D of Appendix A of this guidance for that document. In terms of testing laboratories, ASCA accredited testing laboratories perform testing in accordance with the specifications of ISO IEC 17025 and ASCA program specifications associated with each eligible FDA-recognized consensus standard test method. A testing laboratory may work with a device manufacturer to develop a test plan. After testing is complete, the testing laboratory provides the information listed in the relevant ASCA program specifications, including an ASCA summary test report, to the device manufacturer. A testing laboratory may label its testing as having been conducted under the ASCA Pilot only if the FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods used were within its scope of ASCA accreditation at the time of test. Upon granting ASCA accreditation, again, FDA intends to provide the testing laboratory with a scope of accreditation, and the responsibility of a testing laboratory are identified in the signed agreement section, again, refer to Section D. For device manufacturers, here FDA writes that device manufacturers may voluntarily choose to use an ASCA accredited test laboratory to conduct testing to be included in pre-market submissions to FDA. The device manufacturer is responsible for including the appropriate information regarding device testing in its pre-market submission. It is the manufacturer's responsibility to ensure FDA-recognized consensus standards and test methods are selected and used appropriately, and that the DOC provided in a pre-market submission is consistent with the guidance linked here. As noted in the MEDUFA 4 commitment letter, a device manufacturer's internal testing laboratory is eligible for ASCA accreditation. In determining whether to grant ASCA accreditation to a device manufacturer's internal testing laboratory, FDA intends to consider the same factors used in determining whether to grant ASCA accreditation to any other testing laboratory. Any ASCA accredited testing laboratory is expected to follow the processes and policies of this guidance and fulfill the roles and responsibilities described in Section 11 of this guidance. And then in terms of FDA staff, FDA ASCA program staff manage the pilot, including granting ASCA recognition to accreditation bodies, conducting audits, and reviewing information submitted by ASCA-recognized accreditation bodies and ASCA-accredited testing laboratories per their terms of participation. FDA ASCA program staff are also responsible for the ASCA website, which provides an up-to-date listing of ASCA-recognized accreditation bodies, including the scopes and expiration dates for ASCA recognition and ASCA-accredited testing laboratories. FDA ASCA program staff are responsible for ensuring consistent implementation of the processes and policies in this guidance document and providing any training to ASCA pilot participants necessary to A. Maintain FDA's confidence in the testing submitted by ASCA accredited testing laboratories, and B. Ensure that ASCA recognized accreditation bodies meet the criteria specified by FDA for participation in the ASCA pilot and continue to satisfy those criteria throughout their participation in the program. ASCA pilot processes and procedures are described in sections 10 and 11 of this guidance. FDA review staff conduct reviews of pre-market submissions in accordance with existing statutes, regulations, and guidance. When pre-market submissions include testing from an ASCA accredited testing laboratory, FDA review staff are responsible for applying the statute and the policies described in this guidance. The FDA ASCA program staff managing the ASCA Pilot are separate and independent from the FDA review staff conducting pre-market reviews. And if we go over here, we can see that there is the ASCA site, and you can check that out on your own. That fairly well wraps things up for today's guidance document review. Hopefully, after today's video, you, 1, understand the purpose and specific goals of the ASCA Pilot, 2, understand development of the ASCA Pilot, and 3, understand the roles and responsibilities for those involved. Hopefully you found today's video useful and informative, and I look forward to catching you in the next video. Please like, subscribe, provide comments. We rely on you giving us information for driving future content and making it better. So again, thank you for joining us, and look forward to connecting with you in the future. Have a wonderful day.